Some of the most treacherous hazards are the weirs. Now, these are necessary points along the river that help control the water level, but they also create incredibly dangerous rapids and undercurrents, a death sentence to anyone who gets caught up in them. Penton Hook Weir near Staines is no exception. Over the past few years, a number of people have lost their lives in these notoriously dangerous waters.
The river is a very dangerous place, especially the weirs. A lot of people don't realise just quite how dangerous it can be.
One February afternoon, Chris Carey was out on his dinghy with his girlfriend's 17-year-old nephew, Jack.
Well, we was coming down towards the lock and we noticed it was closed, so we thought we'd turn round. And as we went to spin it round, the engine just died.
When the engine cut out, obviously tried to start it back up again a couple of times, and that failed.
And the next thing, we was just getting sucked towards the weir.
Without power, there was no way they could escape the weir.
I thought we was quite away from it at the time, but then the nearer we was dragged to it, the quicker it seemed to go. And all of a sudden, this boat just got sucked straight through this hole. Jack's like panicking and shouting, "We're going to die."
Metal gate hit me on the back of the head and got squashed between that and the dinghy.
I would never have believed that we could have fitted through such a small hole. And then when we got through the other side, Jack wasn't in the boat no more.
Scared if I was going to survive or what. I'm not a very strong swimmer.
When Jack was in the water, all I could see was his head poking out, his arms flapping around like crazy, and he was screaming at the top of his voice for me to help him. I thought he was going to drown because the boat was getting pushed one way and he was getting sucked the other. Because I'm fearing for his life. He's obviously fearing for his life. And I've took him out. He's half my age, so I just want to get him out of the water and make sure he's okay.
Chris managed to throw a rope to Jack and pulled him back into the dinghy. But in saving Jack's life, Chris lost his balance and toppled into the water himself.
Just remember the freezing cold water, and as I span round to look for Jack, he was about 30 foot away by then. And I was just getting sucked back towards the weir.
I was about 50 yards, 100 yards away from him by the time I noticed he was in the water.
Jack clung on to the dinghy and made it downstream to safety, but Chris was sucked under by the vortex of water.
It's not like normal water, it don't just sweep you along, it just sucks you under, throws you up, spins you around. It was like the worst fairground ride in the world. My clothes were getting heavier and heavier and they was just pulling me down. I'm just fighting for my life. I mean, one minute I was above the water shouting, next minute I was under the water, taking a mouthful of water, and that was it. I thought I was dead then.
The powerful currents held Chris until he was too weak to fight any longer.
I didn't think I'd ever get out of there. That's the most frightening thing in my life. There was no worries anymore, I was just slowly sinking down in the water. And it was like I could see everything under there. I just think I gave up because I couldn't struggle anymore. It was just a relief not to be panicking and not to be struggling to get out. I suppose I was getting ready to die.
We'll come back to the man struggling to hang on your home in the event of a fire. Earlier we heard how Chris and his friend Jack had been sucked through a dangerous weir on the River Thames. Jack had clung onto their dinghy and made it to safety, but Chris fell in and was dragged under. He was slowly drowning, just his fingers above water.
I mean, one minute I was above the water shouting, next minute I was under the water, taking a mouthful of water, and that was it. I thought I was dead then.
But Chris had been spotted. 63-year-old local David Bradbury had seen the boat in trouble and ran to help.
I ran as hard as I could. My lungs were burning. When I got to the weir, I could see a hand above the water, and I couldn't see much else. I thought, I haven't got long now, 30 seconds. That hand's not going to stay there much longer.
David knew he only had one shot and threw his rope into the river. Amazingly, it found its mark.
Here, luck was on our side, and especially his, when the rope actually landed across his hand, so he felt the rope land on it.
And all of a sudden something hit my hand, and I just grabbed it.
I can't really see the gentleman, and I pulled on the rope, and I knew I had him because I could feel the weight on the rope.
The next thing I was back up above the water with my head, and back to panicking like crazy again.
Chris was still being dragged down by the water. David lowered himself onto the slippery concrete ledge to try to haul him out of the weir.
I've got to get him quickly because this is winter and hypothermia will be a problem.
And I could just see this, looked like an old man at the top, holding on to the end of a rope.
I had to bend down, get his hands, lift them up, and put his fingertips onto the concrete ledge, but he couldn't hold them there. So I had to kneel on his hands to stop him slipping.
I still thought I was going to drown because I just didn't have the strength to hold on. My arms were killing me, the water was still trying to pull me under, and looking up at this old bloke, he could never have pulled me out.
His face was the face of a desperate man. I nearly lost him 3 times with his hands slipping and having to stop doing what I was doing the rope, grab his hands and put them back onto the concrete. But I'm still concerned because I have no safety harness, no life jacket on. If I go in, I'm going to be lost as well.
We'll return to that terrifying incident. Here we heard how Chris had been sucked into whirlpools on a weir in the River Thames. He was losing strength and was certain he was about to die.
I just think I gave up because I couldn't struggle anymore. It was just a relief not to be panicking and not to be struggling to get out. I suppose I was getting ready to die.
Local resident David had spotted Chris and threw a rope to him. He hung on to him for dear life.
His face was the face of a desperate man. I nearly lost him 3 times with his hands slipping.
Another local, Malcolm, had arrived on the scene and could see David struggling.
And looked down over the side, and there I saw Dave, sitting on this tiny little ledge of concrete, trying to get hold of somebody who I could see was being spun around in that water, which I knew that person would never be able to get out of. And he said, "Help, I need help, I can't manage." The man who Dave was trying to save was in extreme danger. Without Dave's presence there, he would be dead. And that, for any of us, must be an experience of total fear.
Malcolm lowered himself to the ledge, and between them they tried to drag Chris out of the weir.
And then we struggled and pushed and kind of shoved until we could actually drag him up onto the ledge.
They were now just inches above the turbulent waters, but still couldn't get Chris back up to safety.
He's lying there on a cold piece of concrete, and the risk of hypothermia is getting worse by the minute.
David and Malcolm clung onto Chris and kept him conscious for a grueling 45 minutes until the rescue services were able to help.
The position was very precarious in that there was no room for them to move around, and they were balancing and they were having to hold on to the sides and onto each other. There seemed no possibility for them to make their way back up unaided.
The firemen had to act quickly. They attached Chris to a harness and hauled him to safety.
Once we got him up to the top and over the guardrail, he couldn't stand on his own 2 feet. He had to be supported. He was freezing cold, soaking wet, and in a very bad way.
Despite his ordeal, Chris was treated for hypothermia and made a complete recovery. But without David, this story would have had a very different ending.
Dave is undoubtedly a very, very brave and resilient man, and I've got a lot of time and admiration for him.
The bit I'll always remember, a lady came out of the crowd and she came up to me and she said, "I'd like to shake your hand, you've just saved that man's life." And that's the thing you remember.
Risked his own life climbing down there. He's just a hero. Still can't believe that the man threw a rope from that far and managed to get it in my hand. The strength and the will he must have had to keep me out of that water was amazing. And yeah, I would have died if it wasn't for him. And I can't thank him enough.
David's efforts were quite rightly recognised with a Royal Humane Society medal that he received at Buckingham Palace. It was a truly terrifying ordeal for both men, but thanks to David's quick thinking and bravery, Chris escaped with his life.
The pieces are coming